Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 108th edition of the Frank and Stan Chat. And as is the case most weeks now, we have a guest joined us, and I'm delighted to say Catherine McLeod has joined us. Hello, Catherine.
Hello.
Hello. And Stan, we've had another fantastic week in the Johnson household.
Yes, things are going well.
They are,
so
yeah.
far.
And I'm pleased to say you're not wearing your white shirt today, which is
Yeah, which means I'm not at a funeral.
correct. But I think, Catherine, you've had a bit of a struggle getting to us this morning. I think you had a very early meeting and then problems with traffic and everything. So thank you for putting the miles in to get here for us.
I got here. I did it. I couldn't let you down.
Catherine, do you want to just explain who you are and what you do, and perhaps how we connected, really?
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Executive of Dingley's Promise, and we're an organisation that works with children with special educational needs and disabilities in the early years. So it's really all about getting every child the best start and making sure that they then move on to the right educational setting for them. We also support families. We have a national training programme to train mainstream nurseries to better support children with SEND as well. So yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah. So is Dingley's Promise, has that come about through a family called Dingley and they had a child who had, I don't know, what's the story behind it?
No, so it was originally called Dingley. It was horrible. The Dingley Family and Specialist Early Years Centres. So a massive mouthful. And that it started back in 1983 when in Reading's Battle Hospital there was a ward called the Dingley ward where all the children with special educational needs were and disabilities were. Yeah.
Right. So how did you get into all of this work then?
Oh, I've been involved in working with children with disabilities since I was about 14. So I've always done it, and I was overseas for quite a long time. I set up a charity in Sri Lanka to support children with disabilities, and always around inclusion. And then I came back to the UK in 2011, and at that point had a brief time with a local MenCap, and then saw this job and haven't really looked back. So I've been here over 7 years now and very happy and really excited about the growth and expansion. So yeah, I love it.
So where are you based?
So we have centres in Reading, in Wokingham and in Newbury. And we are going to be opening more centres across the country in the coming 5 years as part of our 5-year strategy. So yeah, all growing.
So how do you get the funding for all of that?
Oh, it's a complicated mix, actually. So, for example, at the moment, we are hopefully going to be opening a new centre and that will be fully funded. And right. I think what's happened is because people have now understood our model and the way that we work, we are actually now getting local authorities saying to us, we'd really like you in our area. So we're looking at that. However, in our existing areas where we've been for decades, we get about 25% of our income from local authorities and the other 75% is from maybe children in need, big lottery, right. And then individual donors and supporters. So, and also our training income now. So it's a big mix and is a constant fight every year. Yeah, so I'm sure you can imagine.
I can imagine. Yeah. Right, Stan. So
just on that, just to put something in context, 60 years ago, my grandma was the head of what they called the hospital school, which dealt with Down syndrome children. So that was what she did. And that was kind of the relationship I grew up with children in the school when I was very young, that they were Down syndrome children. And I spent every Christmas at their Christmas party and everything like that. But it was, they were isolated them.
Yeah.
Put in the hospital school. It wasn't part of an education system. It wasn't part even of a care system. It was
we've come a long way, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've come a really, and I think it reminds me of my son. So when you talk about that, so when I set up the charity in Sri Lanka, I also had a newborn. And so he would be every week coming into the centre where all the children with disabilities were. And it changed his whole view of what people are like and the range of people, the diversity of people that you know, that's why wherever possible we look at inclusion, because it benefits everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Stan, another week has rolled by. Not much
Not very
has
much
happened
in
I
education.
mean, no, I mean, I was talking to some Wakefield heads yesterday, because Wakefield, this is just an aside, Stan. Um, I was saying about, you know, at times there are sort of your ethics and, you know, what you stand for come into play. And of course, Wakefield's got a by-election coming. So I said, one of the questions was, well, let's pose this question. You know, what's your response when the Prime Minister's office phones up saying that he's making a visit to your school and he wants to have some photos taken with your reception class? And that caused quite a stir in the room as to how you would respond to that, you know. You know, in a way, it was sort of interesting, just sort of what's happened with Lord Guyte and everything this week. You know, I've had enough. I can't stand it anymore. You know, it's gone so far. But actually, you know, I think that was playing into some of the responses that came out from some of the heads yesterday, Stan.
Yeah. It's that difficult one, isn't it? Of where does it put you? I remember Sir David Normington coming to my school with the chief education officer, as he was at the time, and the chief education officer stood with me and David Normington and said, I've spoken to David. These are my views on the issue. Blah, 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 blah. What are yours? Funnily enough, mine are going to be very similar to
Anyways, so lots of stuff going on, both within education, but also in the broader political world. But what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, it's the Times Commission report, which much of which I think is fantastic. It's something that's needed. It's probably been needed for maybe 3 or 4 years. I know they've been working on it for 12 months. But one bit that puzzled me and worried me was the idea of a revalidation of teachers every 5 years. And it worries me in a sense that I think it panders to we've got to get rid of all these rubbish teachers that, in my view, don't exist. But also, if it comes in, how much is it going to cost? And what we're going to revalidate? Because it's linked to CPD. So is the question going to be, you've not done enough CPD? And the answer is, well, you can't afford to send me on CPD. So, and then we go down the route of, well, you should be doing it in your own time. That will be the next step. And in terms of families and work-life balance and everything, that's raises another issue. And I just think it was in a report that's very positive. I think that could have been worded much better to say that what we're actually doing is ensuring that teachers have access to high quality CPD and not necessarily national programs. Because I think the key to it is context and localism on training, as well as understanding how a culture of a school works.
I think it's interesting that also this is about supply and demand as well, isn't it? I was thinking about a guy, is it a CEO called Johnny Utley? Don't know if you've come across him, but he's, you know, I've met him a couple of times. I've always been struck by, you know, sort of his principled approach, and he was doing an interview. We got a clip of it for Forum Strategy this week, and he spoke about, you know, this sort of culture about, well, you know, I'm making this decision because it's in the best interest of the children, you know, and actually that sort of statement sort of suggests that, well, actually you are a commodity, the teacher, you know, you as a member of staff, you're the commodity, and we use you to deliver what's in the best interest of the children. And Johnny was saying that actually, not because, I suppose it's because it's supply and demand, but it's the right thing to do. You have a duty to both parties, don't you?
Yeah, I was taken with what Catherine said about what they do and finding the right setting for children with SEND, because I can remember having a child and the parents desperate to put them in mainstream school, and I could see we could cope for a time, but there would be a time when we weren't doing this child any favors. We weren't actually, and I don't think I bullied the parents, but I did get the parents to agree that they would trust me to say at some point, now is the time you need to move and look at special school, because we've done everything we can. And I think sometimes we pander too much to parents and don't think enough about the children. It's difficult, but
it's a really interesting
This must
point,
happen all the time in your world.
Yeah. I mean, but all the time, but in both directions. So some people are really focused on they really want their child to go to special education, and others really focused on they really want to go to mainstream. And a lot of the time we agree, but sometimes we don't. And obviously it's always the parent's decision. But I think that's where, as an early years setting, you have to have a really good relationship with those families and to be able to have difficult conversations. But what I would say also is the research shows that even some time in mainstream is better for life outcomes than no time. So we often sort of think, even if you only are in mainstream school for 2 years, that will probably lead to better life outcomes for the child than not being there. But it's the age-old problem that the schools need the resources, and they need to be properly supported to be able to give that best support to the child.
And what we were able to do by keeping a little boy called Matthew, we were able then to build some confidence around the parents about special school and let them go and see. And as in most cases, they go around a special school and they come back going, wow, it's fantastic, the resources they've got, what they're doing with those children. There's just a picture of special school that I think a lot of parents have that is very different from reality.
That's really interesting, because we get the opposite. We get a lot of families saying, actually special school is the gold standard. That's what our children need. And so we're often sort of, when we talk to local authorities, saying you need to gather case studies of when it works in mainstream, because often it's not those stories that are repeated, it's the stories of having real problems in mainstream. So it's sort of trying to get a balance of all the examples. So that's really interesting. We've almost had opposite experiences.
I think
the context is important. That's why you can't have a national picture.
It's interesting because I'm involved in Blackpool. Blackpool has a high proportion of special schools, and I think all of them are judged to be outstanding, which is great in one respect. But actually that actually acts as a pull then for parents who actually a child could be located successfully in another local school, of which the vast majority, I think there's only 2 that are not at least good in Blackpool. But the outstanding badge draws their attention, and they're not very well, some of them, not all, some of them are not that well informed about what the offer is. It's more the badge. And actually they feel as though their child will get better sort of support, there'll be more adult support, there'll be specialist equipment. But actually, we're looking at in Blackpool with the support of the schools of actually closing one of those, because the provision can be made, adapted, and better, is better than parents perceive in mainstream settings. So I visited a school where actually, if I didn't tell you it was a special school, you'd be struck. You wouldn't really have any idea it was. So in a way that's where that sort of debate's taking place at the moment, and trying to shift thinking about special schools. The term special is not helpful at times as well. You're right there, Catherine. Keep going.
Sorry, I just had to mute myself. And do you know what's also really interesting, that there are a lot of sort of special schools that have early years provision. And so we've always sort of said that one of the most important things about what we do is to say you're not fixed in special or in mainstream, and actually you could go in and out, and I think because we're not fixed to any schools, so the numbers of children who leave us who go to the mainstream are around 65 to 70%, even though the needs are quite high among those children. But there's certainly a number of local authorities have said to us there's an issue around, once a child has a place in a nursery that's inside a special school, they just keep going. Right, and I think it's that, how do we get opportunities to move back out again? And even in the early years, we move children into mainstream nurseries on a regular basis. When we've, as I think Stan said, it's also about the parents and what they want. And actually sometimes with children, the parents are saying, I'm going to keep them at home, because actually in the early years they don't have to go into an education setting, because I don't believe settings can support them properly. So we do a lot of work with that family, and eventually we can get that child into a mainstream setting. But it's so complicated, because actually that child may not have been highest need, but we know that if you don't work with that family, they'll end up staying at home and they'll turn up on the doorstep of primary school with no early years. So it's a complicated cohort.
Well, what's caught your eye then this week?
Well, I'm going to talk about something that's not really to do with education at all.
Well,
directly.
that's fine, because we've had things like I still remember
growing frogs' legs.
Yeah, we
regrowing legs on frogs.
Yeah, you won't be the first. So
okay,
fire away.
So I love Lizzo, who's a singer, and I was really, really disappointed when her new song came out this week, and one of the words in that song was an ableist slur, really, a bad word. And there was a big backlash on social media. A lot of people were upset about it. And I think because she's somebody who really stands up for people who, may otherwise not be supported, it was a real shock, I think, to a lot of people. But the really brilliant thing, and this made me cry happy tears after the worried tears, was that she saw the feedback, she listened, she reflected. She said she hadn't understood the meaning of the word, and then she's changed it and re-released the song. And I think, certainly for those of us who work in the field of disability, one popular song that all the kids are going to listen to could restart use of that word. And so I just think it was brilliant. So that was my little weepy moment this week of just feeling like things were good.
I mean, I think do you have hope and faith, with the younger generation, because of this sort of like more informed, more aware, or where do you sit with that?
I mean, I have a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old, and it amazes me that the 17-year-old, certainly around sexuality, gender, that side of things, the way that they think in that generation is incredibly open and incredibly sort of welcoming and accepting of hugely different types of people. I suppose I slightly worry that disability doesn't seem to be as fashionable in that sort of way. And so certainly the R word I hear used quite a lot, and I'm always pulling people up on that as well.
Really? Right.
And I think certainly from that side of things, I feel really encouraged by the way that it is around sort of LGBTQ plus issues. I think race, we still have a long way to go as well, and it's something that in our nurseries we've done quite a lot around equity, diversity and inclusion, and around anti-racism with Liz Pemberton, who's now an advisor. And I think the younger generations know what they should be saying, but unfortunately I think disability is probably the least, where there is the least awareness among younger generations.
Do you think that's around visibility within the media, role models, or do you just think it's, in a way, it's sort of pushed to one side, isn't it? In the way that lack of inclusion in some respects might be a factor.
Well,
I think it is. Sorry, Stan.
No, go on. I was going to say on the racist thing, we did some research in Burnley after the riots there. And one of our conclusions was that we never, with early years, we never get them to understanding racism. We just tell them it's not right to say these words. So what our research showed is we bury the words until they become teenagers. And at that point, the teacher isn't strong enough to stop that. And those words then, and those feelings and those meanings all come back out again. Instead of at a very early stage, a very simple thing, yes, that's somebody's different from you, but that doesn't mean it, it's not, you don't say that, you understand that there is a reaction as a very young child when another child is different. It's a built-in response, but we need to talk to them about understanding it, not just saying, oh, you don't say that, because all we did was suppress the vocabulary.
Absolutely. And also that part around how many people say, oh no, I don't see colour. oh no, kids, color doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's so common, but actually it's not right. You know,
no.
color does mean something, and there are differences in everybody's experience of the world, and you've got to recognize that, not just say, no, we don't see color, we're not talking about that.
No.
Yeah.
Or you mustn't say that. You can think it, you can feel it, but you mustn't say it. And then when peer pressure then at 15 and 16 is stronger than the pressure from the school or from their local society, that there's a flick back to a racist view, which may have already been there, but it's expressed now openly. Did
you see the Channel 4 program, The School That Tried to End Racism?
No.
I think
that was brilliant.
Yeah,
it was really interesting, really. And for me, it was quite personal because my eldest son is half Sri Lankan. And actually one of the children in the program was half Sri Lankan, and she was talking about that experience. But just like making kids aware, the really interesting thing was they said that actually up to a certain age, children are, you know, they pretty much play together, they are together, they don't see any differences. I've just said not to say that, but until a certain age. And then it's sort of around, I think it's sort of around 12, 13, they then start to just move into different groups and they separate themselves. I thought that was really interesting as well, just that there's an age when suddenly it just separates out.
I think it's also interesting that, I mean, it's probably numbers this, but actually there's a Down syndrome BBC children's presenter who's become very popular. And actually, in a way, what's crucial here is actually increasing not that person's visibility, you know, to the public, but actually just extending the range and the number of people with disability or with special educational needs to actually sort of just engage, you know, so they're actually just integrated more regularly. And I fear that my great fear with all of this is that it's done now. You know, this is now the time to improve it, isn't it? Rather than say, well, we've addressed that issue now. Let's you know, we've now got something else we've got to deal with. You know.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's draw a line under it and let's move on. That's cool.
Well, where have I heard that before, Stan? Well, what's caught my eye this week is again the Times Education Commission. I was pleased to be involved in that commission. I wasn't one of the commissioners, but we hosted two events, one in Bradford and one in Blackpool, and the Blackpool one has got quite a big section on it. But interestingly, we spoke to them about early years, and they've picked up on early years in the view of it addressing social mobility and levelling up. And I think that's really helpful because I think it's got to be seen in its early years, in its where it goes to, what it leads to, what the outcomes are, rather than, oh, that's good for, you know, for working parents or whatever, you know, and this is good education. And I was struck by a couple of things that I wasn't aware that the 8 programs that currently fund and support early years come from 3 different government departments. I wasn't aware of that. So in a sense, you probably are, because you're dealing, Catherine, with the funding streams for all of this, you know. But actually, the first recommendation is actually just putting that together in one pot. And I would go further by saying, and give that pot to the local community, whether that's a local authority or whether that's a region or whatever, so that actually that can then ensure that whatever money is coming in is targeted at the most needy, the ones that need it most. And also it talks about the fact that really that I should have realized this, but there are 2 systems here, isn't there? That children are getting unique pupil numbers from the Department for Education, but they're also getting a health number, your national health insurance number, and they're 2 different numbers. So we don't have a central system that logs all the children in the country. There is held by 2 different departments. So in a way, we have Stan's got a vague look.
I'm just wondering. I'm trying to remember. When do they get that unique pupil number? Is it in year 1?
I don't know whether they get it as soon as they enter a state-funded provision. I know that I'm pretty certain our grandchildren who go to, well, two of our grandchildren go to early years settings, one of which in children is absolutely fantastic. It's amazing. But I know they haven't got numbers, and they're not in the state's system, shall we say. They're not yet in the state system. So I think they probably get that when they become 5, or
school age, the term after they're 5.
Yeah, but it's crazy, isn't it? Because where I mean, there's an increase in the number of, and this might be relevant for you, Catherine, but the number of parents who are choosing to educate their children at home has gone through the roof. And I was saying I was in Wakefield yesterday talking about this and saying, well, we've got to view this in a post-pandemic world where actually parents have had a chance to educate their children, and some of them actually like it. You know, they may actually think they can do it better. I mean, and I know the government's drive is to get everybody back into school, but actually I'm sort of I am sympathetic to those parents who want to do this at home, and I understand the safeguarding issues that we need to be mindful of, but I still think that parents should have the right to be able to teach their children at home, if they can ensure that is a good experience for them.
Yeah, my worry is also always the socialization. Then that's the one thing that it flags up to me, having sort of worked with parents who have done home education and then who have brought their children into state education late. And you can see that they're just not used to working with groups of children, or overwhelmed by the number of children in a school.
Yeah,
I just think if you can get that right, if there's a way of getting that right, then I can, part of me can support home education. But I'm not the greatest of fan, I have to say.
No, I could feel it's done. I think I knew that anyway.
Oh.
Catherine, I mean, in a way, Catherine, that's a model though that you were referring to before, wasn't it? Really, about some provision here, some provision there. Some of that may be home educated.
I think the biggest worry for us around SEND and home learning is really where it's that parents feel they don't have a choice because the education is not right for their child.
Yeah.
And I suppose certainly one of the things that we look at when we're looking at how successful the SEND system is how many children with SEND have been taken out of the education system. So I think my worry is it's not necessarily that families are saying, yeah, you know, we loved that during lockdown. Let's, you know, enjoy teaching our children. I think it's more about not having faith that the system can actually support their child properly. And so for us, those numbers around home education, you know, we always look very carefully at them. Yeah. And certainly when children leave us, we've had a number of situations where there is no school space for them and they're forced to stay at home with parents who are stressed, unhappy, don't know how to do it. So I think, yeah, for us, normally it's a red flag that children are not getting the support that they need.
Right. I mean, the other thing within the report, it talked about a school readiness card at the end of nursery, describing skills and development.
Yeah, so school readiness is a term that a lot of us really don't like. And I mean, I've certainly had schools say, well, you know, it's not acceptable. The child needs to sit for this many minutes in a chair and focus on that. And, you know, and of course, what we've been doing is looking at what does the child need? The education has to fit the child. So I think on a wider scale, it is very difficult that primary education and early years education is so different in nature. And what we want is for children to want to go to school, to be supported effectively at school. And unfortunately, again, especially with children with SEND, saying, let's get you ready to fit into a certain role in school doesn't tend to bring out the best in children.
Yeah, my argument's always been we should roll early years teaching up the school, not pressing down. What we're doing. I think we did some research on things like creativity and independence, and found that in the schools that we went to, independent learning was highest in reception and lowest in year 6.
I mean, and my final one on the commission was it talked about improving early years, improving the early years workforce, and valuing that more, you know, by actually ensuring that there was better professional development for them, you know, and actually a sort of a clearer sort of route through, which is in a sense valued more by the profession, because I still see parents who view, you know, the fantastic work of which I probably would not choose to do in an early years setting, you know, being not valued as much as, say, your sort of A-level history teacher, you know. So it's just that sort of element of it.
You know, and I massively agree and would love for the early years sector to be more valued. And I think, you know, even when we transition children to school, sometimes the school will say to us, no, we don't need any of your reports. We know what we're doing. Really? We're professional and we'll assess them. Thank you very much. We don't need yours. When we've worked with a child for 3 or 4 years, you know, but I think you can't get away from the fact that, and we mentioned recruitment and retention a little bit as well, but you know, the early years workforce is so low paid, and at the moment we're just losing people to go and work in supermarkets because it's less stressful, less skilled and better paid. And I just think that at the moment the funding for early years is not right in the slightest, and it's all very well to say we love and value you, but right now, you know, we all know that the situation's getting worse, cost of living is going up, and you know, we're already in a crisis for recruitment in the sector, and without some real investment in it, I don't see how people are going to feel valued in the way they should.
No. I bet those primaries that say to you, we don't need your records and things, go mad when the secondary schools, when they receive their children, don't take their records.
I mean, handing over the baton is the most dangerous time in a relay race, isn't it? You know, and actually it's an element that we give very little attention to, or insufficient attention to. But in a relay race, it's primarily what they do all the time, you know.
Yeah, I think, and with transitions, we've been doing a big project supported by the Department for Education around getting those best transitions in place. And there's so much that can be done, but a lot of it does boil down to that relationship again between the early years and primary schools. And unless that's there, it's very, very difficult to give the right information for it to be heard, and then for the family to feel like they're moving through, not that they're falling off a cliff and then don't know what to do.
What do you do
at the other end of the scale? I did some work in Stoke looking at transition from primary to secondary. And what was fantastic there, that they looked at it, not the year 6 to year 7 transition. They did year 4 to year 9. That was their transition period. So, and it was about continuity in subjects and learning, not about, oh, you're going to the big school now, so it'll all be different. It was unfortunately when we were evaluating it, the pandemic kind of
stopped it all.
But how are you addressing then the recruitment and retention issues?
Catherine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Catherine, sorry.
So that's all right.
Nobody wants to work with Stan, so I mean, we know he has a recruitment and retention issue. No, but yeah, for Catherine, how are you dealing with that? Because that you know, I mean, I suppose there's a calling to this work, isn't there? That it's you know, that you can pull on that, but actually people have still got to pay a bill, haven't they, at the end of the month?
They do. I mean, we've just reviewed all of our salaries. We've also just reviewed the way we recruit and making sure that we shout about benefits, because actually we didn't realise a lot of the things that we do are actually not standard in the main workforce. So we do a lot more of that now, and we're actually at the moment we're currently well staffed for the first time in quite a long time. But I think for a lot of people, and certainly we did some research with our teams, and one of the things is we're term time only. So we get a certain cohort of families who say, actually, that really suits us. So that's a big reason why a lot of people do work for us.
Yeah.
But equally, they may not work for us because they want full-time year round because they need more income.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's just been about us being a lot clearer on the benefits of working for us and making sure that our name is known locally. And actually now people do come to us saying, we've heard that you do amazing work and I'd love to work for you. So I think, although, you know, sometimes you think about the school or the setting and you have your social media and all the rest of it, you think, oh God, but actually you do build up a little following of people who actually really are interested in that area. And that has helped us quite a lot.
Fantastic. Well, it's funny how the time goes. We've now reached room 101. But before we get to room 101, I mean, last week we introduced if you were sort of stuck on a train or in a situation, is there anybody in particular that you'd love to spend a bit of time with just to get to know them a little bit better, apart from Stan and myself?
Oh no, that's awful. I haven't prepared anything for that.
Don't worry. Well, let me go to room 101 then. So
I have prepared room 101.
what or who would you put in room 101?
I would put in room 101 standard parenting training. So when a lot of families with children with SENS say they think there's an issue, a lot of professionals, especially health professionals, will say, right, well, the first step is for you to do parenting training, which basically says to the family, oh, I'm a bad parent, there isn't any special education needs or disabilities. And it drives me insane to be in meetings with when people say, no, what we need to do is give them parenting training. So people need to listen to families, and I know they're not always right, but wow, that is, it makes me a little bit livid.
I'm not wishing to sort of say that I'm brilliant at this. I'm not, but I do remember one of the sort of statements that I told staff was that and it was for me, if a parent came to me and said, look, I think there's something wrong here, they invariably were right.
Yeah,
we just hadn't seen it. You know, they know when their child is not quite right. You know, for whatever reason, even if it's your child's going down with a cold. You know, there's no runny nose. There's nothing there. You just know. You know, and I always value. I put great value in what the parent was saying because they knew the child better than I did.
I wish everybody was like that.
Yeah, I really do. Slightly different approach though, Frank, isn't it? If somebody comes to say, you know, there's something in my child's life that's not working. Is it school? Could it be something at school rather than my child's being bullied at your school, which is very different.
I meant really
blame the school first.
Yeah, no, I meant more with you know, if they came with a learning issue, one that they were concerned about, a serious one. I mean, just to pick up though, if we were to have a slot about, you know, who would you like to be stuck in a carriage with for a journey down to London? I know a few people that I certainly wouldn't want to be with, but I do know that I have been struck by. I'm reading that Barack Obama wrote an autobiography, and it's massive. So every time I go to the caravan where we're in North Wales, I probably plough through about 100 pages of it. But I would be really interested to spend some time with him just to understand, you know, how he works and what he's thinking, the way he's thinking. And I remember hearing him say, you know, well, what was the thing that you learned from your presidency? He was asked by a child, and he said, well, the thing I learned very quickly is that other people have more power than I do. You know? And actually, you've got to, when you realize that, your leadership has to evolve into a slightly different way of working, you know, and so things like that.
Well, you get rid of everybody who disagrees with you.
What's that?
You get rid of everyone that disagrees with you. That's another approach.
I have to say, it may be cheating, but whenever I'm working, I'm always trying to recruit people who know more than me. And, you know, I may be the chief executive, but I want people around me who are going to tell me I'm wrong. And, you know, that's the best team you can possibly have.
I always wanted them to make me look better than I really am. You know, I mean,
tell me I'm wrong in private, not in public.
Yeah. And I can say I've had people like that who are still really respecting years later, those that have quietly said, well, I think we haven't quite got that one right.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's amazing. Thank you very much for joining us, Catherine. If people want to know a little bit more about the charity, it's got a website.
Yes, so just go to www.dingley, which is dingley.org.uk, and you can find out everything about us. Come on some training, come and visit. We're really open.
Is that some of that training online as well?
Yes, yeah. Right. It's all online at the moment. So you have face-to-face sessions, but they're on Zoom like this. So yeah, it's all online.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I think was it Max Pescatori who put us together?
Yes, it was.
So
Absolutely.
thank you to Max as well, who we're looking to see if we can get Max back again to join us. So thank you for the lead, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
and
Catherine.
yeah, and you and me again next week with another guest, Stan. So until then, thank you everybody, and
Thank you.
we'll see you then.